Okay, this is something I learned about last week, and I am very excited to be able to share it with all of you. Now, I'm a huge fan of the 80s, as you know, and not the corporate 80s like on Stranger Things. Like, I've done my homework, and I was there. And there's a lot of 80s like symbols and shapes that are very evocative of the era, like those black squiggles. You'll have that pastel triangle, and then the half circle behind it. You know, those kind of things. And you think, okay, these are shapes of the 80s, whatever. The thing is, they didn't come from just spontaneously from the culture. They were invented by a specific organized group. I only learned about this now. It was called the Memphis Group, and it was created by Italian architect and designer Ettore Sottsass. That's his name, however you pronounce it. In 1980, he named the Memphis Group for the Bob Dylan song Stuck Inside of Mobile with the Memphis Blues Again, because it played repeatedly at the meeting, which marked the group's founding. Now look at some of their designs. So the crew of designers, it's a bookcase that they made, that Sottsass convened, presented their first collection in Milan in 1981. They continued to produce pieces for most of the decade, and then they disbanded in 1988. That is the 80s couch, right? If you had a genie and you said, make me a couch that's the 80s incarnate, he would be like, you have wishes and you want a couch? But that is it. But this isn't someone mimicking the 80s. This is the team creating the 80s. Now, like a lot of design movements, the Memphis Group was a reaction to what had come before. Sottsass and his collaborators were bored with the restrained lines and minimal color palette of modernism, and they wanted to create something completely different. So their designs were wild and exuberant. Yeah, looks very familiar, right? We feel like we've seen all these things, but we haven't, because this is the originals. Their designs are wild and exuberant and composed of brightly colored geometric shapes rendered in a simple, almost two-dimensional way, which gave them a playful and almost childlike feel. Now, not many of these intentionally bizarre pieces, look at that, that's so cool, made their way into the homes of average people, but the Memphis Group had enormous influence in 80s design. Their unabashed exuberance and their love of big look-at-me designs was a particularly good fit for the me decade, and some of their trademark elements, which are those bright colors, those wacky shapes, and a kind of cartoonish two-dimensionality, are at the core of what we think of as 80s design. But not everyone was a fan. Critics derided it as a joke and a bizarre and forgettable blip on the design radar. And one critic, I think this was spot on, called it a shotgun wedding between Bauhaus, which was the 1940s and earlier architecture movement, and Fisher-Price. I think that's a perfect way to capture it. So that is the Memphis Group. Look at that. Is that cool? And that is hipster history. Okay, we don't have an outro for that. We never do.